Hello, we're doing Hunter's tutorial night. We're kind of starting we're starting now, and I'm too interested in this to like remember to record early, so this is starting a little late, so apologies to everyone. He's doing some fleet building basics. Enjoy.
Information denial, attacking slash taking point. So this is typically like what is called frontline. If you're building a frontline fleet, you're usually very heavy on offensive capability. Defending points and holding space. This is also associated with frontline, but also backline does a lot of defending points too, or punishing the opposing team for trying to take your points. And it also holds space very well. Skirmishers are also useful for this too. These are just terminology. And then finally, DPM or killing ships and reducing enemy combat power. This is actually can be wrapped up into frontline and backline too, because these are skirmish ships typically are designed for doing short combat engagements where they degrade the opponent, and then your backline will typically finish them off. Or frontline will finish them off. Backline is also kind of like that as well, depending on what kind of ship it is. So, like something like a container liner, for instance, that is sort of fills a similar role to a skirmisher ship in the skirmishing fleet, in the sense that it's harder for it to actually like fully kill something, but it will cripple it to the point that a frontline fleet will be able to kill it very easily. So to start, let's build a ANS frontline fleet because it is probably the easiest thing to make. Um, when you're considering a ANS frontline fleet, there's usually three options that I go to, which is the Axford, Solomon, and the Keystone. Now, the Keystone for frontline sounds a little weird because it's quite a fragile ship, but you can actually do some pretty interesting things with these ships using jammers to get really close to your opponent with beams. But I don't think I'm going to do that because I don't really want to do that right now. So instead, we're going to do a frontline Axford fleet. And I'm just going to base this my own version of Task Force Oak because that's the classic uh, MIDI fleet that is always suggested to people when they first start playing the game. Now, because I'm trying to do a frontline fleet and this is ANS, I have to remember a couple things about ANS versus OSP. I want to be able to engage OSP directly in a fight without getting myself killed right away. Because I know that if you don't know this, I guess this is a better thing to think about, is that OSP is better at front ending their damage compared to ANS. So you have to be really careful about what engagements you're taking with these kinds of ships. For instance, like if I just try to take a straight fight with my Axford against a line ship that's equipped with all 220s or 250s or 450s, I'm going to die very fast. But I have a few advantages with my Axford, such as repairability and the ship's faster than battleships too, so you have a bit of mobility advantage. Now, I can just go to my first mount here. I'm not going to meme with railguns because capital ship railguns are a noob trap right now, unfortunately, so we're just going to ignore that. And I don't think I really want to do cannons because cannons, it's the classic. But you know what? I'm gonna do a beam Axford instead. And there's only one mount that the beam can be equipped onto the Axford, which is the bottom mount. So this is going to be a pretty aggressive build since I'm using beams, but I don't mind doing that for a frontline fleet. It's going to give the weapon group beam right here. You don't have to do that, but I don't do that with all my fleets, but for demonstration's sake, I'm going to do it right here. Typically, when you're building a fleet, it is best to start from mounting and work your way down through compartments into modules, because choosing your weapons decides how you're going to be playing the ship. And then choosing your compartments decides a little less on how you're going to be playing the ship. But say, for instance, you decide, like in our case right now, we're doing a beam. So this is the only weapon I'm going to be putting on this ship. Actually, I'm not going to do that. The top mounts I'm going to leave empty. I'll explain why I'm doing this as I go, but I want to be able to fit 2 beam Axfords into a single fleet, and putting more weapons on this is going to diverge the kind of spread the capability out of this fleet a little bit, and I don't really want to do that. I want to focus all of my effort into making this a pure frontline, like, assault fleet, basically. So from here, all the rest of these mounts are probably either going to be PD or weapon support, such as bullseye. The classic position for the Axford for a bullseye is going to be this front mount right here, mount 8. So we'll just go ahead and put a bullseye there. You don't have to put a bullseye here, because I also have this mount available. I could put it up here. Oops, that's not a bullseye. Something like it. And then put PD here instead, something like that. Looks a little weird, but those are options for you. I'll just stick with this for now, though. I'll put my defender right here. Once you've decided on a weapon system that you want to use, you can either consider what you're going to be defending against as well, or you can move on to compartments. Just for demonstration's sake, right now, I'm going to decide to do my point defense network first. Now, because I know how OSP plays, I know that the primary thing I'm going to be having to fight is either containers or torpedoes right now. S2s are still pretty common in OVA as well, but they're not nearly as common as containers and torpedoes are at the moment, especially torpedoes. Torpedoes are very, very popular for killing capital ships at the moment because they are very, very good at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mounts and I'm just going to start stacking a huge amount of defenders on it, because it's pretty much the only thing that's going to be good against torpedoes. Actually, so one thing to consider here too, if you look at the mount placement for these shoulder mounts for the defenders, if a torpedo strike is coming at me from a broadside like this, currently I have 3 weapons, or I suppose this defender, can they actually point straight up here? Their elevation. Is there a maximum elevation for
It
these?
says it on the stat card, I think, if you click on it.
Oh, it does it? Okay, yeah. So it's not quite 90, but it's close enough. So this can almost be shooting it. This is 4 defenders that could theoretically be firing at incoming torpedoes at the same time. And since I'm not using my 2 top mounts here, I could actually do this as well if I really wanted to, and remove these 2 defenders for price reduction, and then use these mounts for something else. Looks a little strange, doesn't it? Now, these wing mounts on an Axford are actually better suited for stonewalls, as opposed to these front mounts. I'm going to go defender heavy on this build because I know that I'm playing a beam ship, so I'm going to be close to things. I'm going to be getting very close, which means that torpedoes are going to be my #1 threat here. As long as I play intelligently around other possible OSP frontline ships, such as 250 LNs, 450 LNs, things like that can do a lot of damage to me, I should be okay using cover trying to do that and being smart about my movements. You can use cover to mitigate a huge amount of damage in this game. That is your primary defense against damage, is cover. You should never be relying off of your PD to try to negate damage. Or, sorry, your armor, or I guess in the Axford's case, it is armor and heal tank. Those are just, that's secondary capability. Like, you only really need that if you're getting shot at. And so you want to be preventing lines of sight from even appearing so that you can be shot. But we're considering if we find ourselves in a situation where a tug swarm comes around a corner or something like that, we were caught off guard and we weren't ready for it, then we want to be able to at least try to mitigate the amount of damage that we're going to take from something. So the best way to do that is to put on a ton of defenders, because torpedoes are what are going to ambush us, most likely. So with this setup, we have 4 defenders from the side, on each side. And then we have 3 from the front, plus the 2 stone walls. From the bottom, we have 3 as well, plus the 2 stone walls. And then you can kind of see doing this with your camera while you're in the editor will give you a good idea of like the angles of where somebody can hit you, where your PD is the weakest. It'll also give you an idea on how to roll your ship using the heading and roll commands to mitigate the amount of damage. So once we build our second Axford, which will be with this one, you can kind of like, when you're playing, I'll do like a kind of quick demo in the testing range to show what I mean with this, but you can kind of angle the 2 ships at different angles to try to have their PD overlapping on each other's weak sides, rather than just letting them both be on the same. A good example of this is when you have 2 of these ships, you'll have one of them upside down and the other one straight up like that, right? So they both have like the 2 strongest angles on the opposite sides of one another. So just for now, let's just stick with this. This is kind of a wacky build, but it's not something I would normally make, but here we go. So when you're considering components, I love components. Doing components design layout in a ship is always really fun, because the way that the components are laid out gives you different ideas on how you should be trying to lay them out. Okay, let me just reword that. When you have 3 stack like this of components, if you can put 3 reinforced components together, it's a lot better than trying to put, you know, like if I like put my, I don't know, let's just say everyone puts their CIC right here in an Axford, because it's like pretty much the safest spot, actually right there, I believe, just because like behind the beam turret. But then say I was like, oh, I kind of want to put some DC in, I'll just like start randomly putting stuff in, just because, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. And I decide I want to put a large there, and no one else. Worst. So in this situation, it's actually better to do something like this instead of putting a large down here. You want to put a reinforced magazine, another reinforced locker, and now you'll notice these 3 components are all reinforced. And this is important because if a round, such as a 450 HE shell, impacts the bottom part of the ship right here, we'll notice a couple things about this. First of all, the component damage is 150 hit points. Now, this gets reduced by damage reduction, which is also another important feature we'll talk about here in a second. And its explosion radius is 15. I believe that's 15 meters. I don't know, though. I could be wrong if someone knows what that actually means.
Yes, 15 meters.
It's 15 meters. Thank you, Puppy. So, if you have a round impact where the 15-meter radius hits all 3 of these components, and I have a 40% reduction in damage, so 40% off of 150, I think that's, what is that? That's like 90 damage total instead of 150 being applied. That 90 damage is then split between all 3 components. And because that 90 damage is split between all 3 components, and if we look at the damage threshold, it's 35. Each component takes 30 damage. They can't actually have their DT broken, so they won't die. Which is why having, well, they won't be grayed. So having 3 reinforced components next to each other like that, it's a really strong way of reducing the amount of damage that you take. You'll also notice this with the cellos as well. The cellos have the 4 compartments in the front. If you put 4 RDC in the front there, they just never die to 450 HE, because they all absorb the damage together, and the damage threshold never gets beat. So you can do a similar thing with Axfords by putting 3 reinforced components on the bottom here. It just increases their survivability a lot more. So now that we've got that out of the way, another thing to consider about this too is our crew complement. I love gaming crew complement. I always go, well, I try to always go undercrewed. And the way that you can calculate this is typically the list will give you a good idea. So like right here, right now, see, I got my aux steering here. Right now, I think only engineering is the one that's going to be reducing here. So my maximum crew is 234. My actual maximum crew before I start having serious repercussions from this in terms of DC team reduction is 254, because you just take the 20 from engineering and add it to that. So you can go over crew by 20 crew members before you start possibly noticing it. This also happens to be the reason why these bottom compartments, whenever I'm building a ship, I try to fill them with things that are kind of supplementary to the ship's combat. So if I was building a gunship, for instance, I would put a gun plotting center here, because it takes crew away from my total crew that I can go over before it takes team crew away. So now instead of being able to go 20 crew over, I can go 50 crew over if I really wanted to. Not saying I'm necessarily going to do that, but if I wanted to, I could do that. Let's say, this spot's pretty precarious actually, because it usually gets shot out really quickly. So maybe we can get away with putting the berthing there. Remove the berthing there, 162. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Let's do the berthing here, and then let's try damage control. Damage control centers, not something I would normally take on an Axford, but with the change to the heal, it's actually probably pretty good, because your team move speed and then the repair speed are both really strong. And also this lets me do the gaming thing I was talking about before. So this adds a little bit more. Yeah, see, 10 DC coordinators. Now I can go 30 over crew. My actual crew limit now is, instead of 162, it's 192. From here, you can just start adding random stuff, I guess, like auxiliary steering as well. We can do a RDC. Auxiliary steering is a wonderful component. It's a reinforced component, which is hilarious. It has 300 hit points. It is very good for soaking damage. Now, for 10 points, people typically will take a rapid because they like the DC. But auxiliary steering is also a really good option if you don't know what else to take for 10 points, because it lets you keep control of your ship to move after your DC or your CIC is taken out, if that does happen. If you're in a bad spot and your CIC is down, having an auxiliary steering is actually really useful. When I first started playing, I thought that this component was completely useless, but it actually is probably one of the best components in the game. So I do recommend using it as much as possible for increasing the survivability of your ship.
Hey, Hunter.
Hi.
I was wondering, so out of curiosity, when you're undercrewed, does it always take from engineering first?
Yes, it does. And the reason for that is because engineering is in your modules. So the way that the crew assignment works is bottom up. So module 12 takes crew first, module 11, 10, 9, et cetera, until it hits compartment. Then it does the same thing from the bottom of the compartments up to the top, and then it does mounts up. So you can't actually game it so hard that you can run no DC at all and put all of your crew, take crew out of your mounts. You can't do that, unfortunately. I wish you could, but because of the way that it's being programmed, you can take them out of modules, which is typically all engineering, I believe.
I think that's maybe explained a little bit backwards. Crew is filled from the top of the list to the bottom. So mounts first, then compartments, then modules from the top to the bottom. And DC lockers are the only things that actually like need crew. So if you look at your compartments below your last DC locker, you can see there in compartment 8, that is the lowest DC locker on Hunter's ship. All of the components below that DC locker, if you sum up all of their crew requirements, then that is the amount of crew you're allowed to go over.
Exactly, yes. Thank you, Wolf, for explaining that a bit better than I did. So that's how that works. So at this point, we've pretty much kind of got a basic layout going here. I'm kind of a little bit, I don't really like that I have only RDCs right now. And yeah, so I have 3 RDCs. They are being buffed by a DCC, so that's really nice. Plus the max repair. The Axford's max repair is wonderful. And then, yeah, so I do kind of want some more restores, which means that I'm going to put some larges in here. And larges are really weird. I feel like a lot of people have mixed relationships with larges. You love them because they give you 2 restores, but you also hate them because they die really fast. And then you have to use your reinforced restores to repair the larges. Let's just see how much over crew we are. So yeah, we're 175 over 162, so this is acceptable. We'll have to see how much we go over on modules, because I'm pretty sure the modules are going to suck up more crew, and we'll have to be a bit careful about that. So might have to move some stuff around here. So now that we've come to modules, it's probably important to note that when I first started designing this, I wanted to build something that was a frontline and was fairly aggressive and fast. And being a beam Axford, your base speed is pretty bad. 18 meters per second is not really the greatest. So we're going to have to speed that up by giving it a whiplash. And my typical Axford layout for this as well, this is just, drive layout is one of those things that is, there's not really that many options in terms of the configurations that you can do that are good for any specific role, because like there's like 1 or 2 layouts for any specific role is what I mean. So in this case, I really only want a Raider and a Whiplash, because I need to be able to, first of all, change direction very quickly. This is very, very important for a beam Axford. You need to be able to change direction very quickly, and you need to be able to get where you're going fast. So the 2 options for that, like those are my 2 requirements, right? I need to get where I'm going quick. Well, that's a Whiplash. I need maximum speed. And I need to be able to change direction fast. That's a Raider. I need linear thrust for that. So this does cause some problems with rotation, but you can kind of deal with that with smart play. It's not entirely necessary that you have really good rotation for this. Now, also being a beam, Puppy's gonna hate me for this, but I'm gonna have to make a decision on my next 3x3s right here, which are all the parts that allow you to get more damage out of a beam, which is a focused particle accelerator. So let's see here. I'm gonna just do 2 FPAs on either side. Now, layout here is also pretty important in a weird way. You got to be considering where you're going to be getting shot from. So if I put my FPAs here on these 2 modules instead of the ones in the back, there's a higher probability that they're going to get knocked out from the front, even if it's quite low. Like if you start taking rounds on the wings, HE will splash over onto these focused particle accelerators. But if you put the micros here, like you're trading power survivability for damage survivability here, and then you can swap them around, right? But what good is damage survivability if you can't actually shoot? So that's a bit of a decision that you need to make yourself. There is no right or wrong way when it comes to that. Typically, I would say it's probably better to lose your FPAs than not be able to fire at all. So I'm just going to put the micros in the back. Now we got to consider our points. We're getting pretty high up there, and I do want 2 Axfords in this fleet, and I still need to do ammunition, so I got to be careful about what my next module choices are going to be. And I also need to consider my radar. I'm going to do a parallax in this example because parallaxes are great, and I don't want to run a Frontline on a beam Axford. For capital ships on ANS, you don't have to run a parallax or a spyglass, but running a Frontline on a capital ship as ANS is a very big gamble. So do so at your own risk.
Why is that a gamble, out of curiosity?
Because front lines are not very sensitive. You'll notice that they being a much weaker radar. Let's just have a look here. Yeah, so minus. I'm not really a genius with how this stuff quite works with detection, but I do know that front lines do not detect shuttles until 4.2 kilometers. And when you're in a Axford, if a shuttle comes around a corner and is able to close with you at, let's say, flank speed 50 some odd meters per second, and you don't see it until 4.2 kilometers, and given this example right here being a beam Axford, you are probably going to get rocketed before you can actually engage those ships. So you want a parallax instead to give you that slight range advantage of detection, so you can react to it sooner. The sooner you know something is there, the sooner you can react to it. Parallax gives you that little bit extra range. I can't remember what the default detection range on shuttles is for parallax, but I know that it's not 4.2 kilometers like it is for the front line.
If you scroll down, you have show hidden stats, so you can probably just look at that.
Oh, here we go. Right. So yeah, so it's more than 6. So that's 1.8 kilometer increase in distance that you're getting out of the parallax. So that's an extra. Let's see here, 50. What would that be? That would be. That's more than an extra minute, basically, of reaction time that you get in order to decide how you're going to react to something like a shuttle pushing you. So that's why it's better to run, at least in this case, if you're a battleship, you have a little bit more leeway there because you can use your teammates or your escort to spot for you instead. Like you could run a spyglass frigate with a battleship and a front line on the battleship. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but you could do that if you really wanted to save power on your battleship. Because your battleship's not going to get killed by something like that, right? Like your battleship can tank nearly, the amount of rockets that's needed to kill a battleship now is just stupendous. Without any kind of support, it's too much it's not a realistic amount. So in this case, we're going to run a parallax because we want that extra range, we want the burn through, and it's just generally better for our situation. And we can afford it with our power constraints. We only have 100 points left now, so I do need to be careful. But that's okay because I only have 4 modules left. So usually I run a adaptive here. You can do the parallax in front of the adaptive to keep it alive because you'll notice the hit points are 40 on the adaptive, and the parallax has 300 hit points, so it's actually pretty tanky. It's pretty much the same as an auxiliary steering. So don't feel afraid to put your parallax in front of your adaptive like this. If you're bow tanking, it will, or even like off angle like that. If there's a round that hits in this general area, the parallax will absorb that damage for the adaptive, hopefully. Some situations it probably won't, but it definitely will from the front. And it's okay if it goes out because, there's 2 situations where your radar goes out, and either you are going to die now or you are in a situation where you can pull back and repair it, and you'll be okay. So 99%, really cutting it close here. Let's see, can we get away with energy regulators? No, we cannot. So one thing about Axfords with the change to the 195. Okay, so I'm still good for crew. 2, my engineering has gone up to 40, so this is actually increased in the amount that I can go over. This is like seriously gaming it, but that's just what you do when you want to build ships that are kind of interesting. So I guess here we don't need to fill all these out, but let's do a 100%. Oh darn. Well, if we look at this now, we're probably going to end up going overpower because I like going overpower. If one of these guns isn't firing, suddenly my power is down. And I'm okay. And I can consider that I also have guns on the other side, and not all of my PD is going to be firing at the same time. So I don't mind going overpower a little bit. Wonder if I can maybe get away with E. Can I do that? 400 over. So 2 defenders will be 350 plus the stone wall is 40. The magazine's taking power, right? That might be a little bit too much. So I'm not going to do a regulator. Now it's kind of sad not to use the 2 modules. I did not intend on doing that. No, I wouldn't normally do this, but this is just a demonstration, so here we are. Now I'm going to do some ammunition. Now for ammo, I'm using, I don't know whose mod this is again. I think it's yours, Wolf, the hidden stats mod.
Yep.
Come on. Yeah, so this is a really good mod. I highly recommend everyone download this to build your ships. This is, ever since I downloaded this, all of my ship designs have increased in efficiency a lot. It really, really helps. If all 5 of my defenders are firing, I'm using 12,000 rounds per minute. This is a pretty crazy high number, but 12,000 rounds.
I hate to like break up the Shohinstat shilling session, but actually defenders are the only weapon in the base game which has a rate of fire increase. So Shohinstats gives rate of fire to every other weapon, but the defender already had it.
Really? I did not know that. I hadn't noticed it, at least. I can also make the assumption that my defenders are not all going to be firing at the same time, but that's fine. We'll just do 12,000 because we want to be a little bit safe here. We could probably even go more. Do 16,000 rounds of 20 mil. And we need some 50 millimeter for the stone walls, which, these running 2 stone walls is a little light for flak, but it'll just do that extra tiny bit of damage that maybe will help you. So at 500 rounds per minute, we can get away with 600. With 2 FPAs, it's a little, against OSP, you don't need more than 2 FPAs, but having more than 2 FPAs does, you'll notice it. So there are other versions of this that you could make with 4 FPAs. Puppy's a pretty big advocate of 4 FPA Axfords, and I do have to say that they work really well. I really like playing 4 FPA battleships because they just kill everything really fast as well. So here's my Axford. Now I can either duplicate this and run 2 of them together, and then this allows me to actually mess around with these even more. Let's see here, what did I do? I did an aux steering, right?
But Hunter, you big stupid idiot, you didn't put the big guns in the big gun slot. Isn't that very bad?
Yes, typically, yes, I would agree. But as I said at the start here, I'm trying to build beam Axfords for frontline assault roles. That is what these ships are designed to do. You want to be at the front with somebody else with these ships, or have someone behind you trying to support you with like CLs or something like that. You want to be getting really close with these ships. Since the points are a little bit messy, I'm actually not going to do another Axford. I'm going to do something else to try to support these Axfords.
So what you're saying
Now,
is that it's okay to downsize mounts in the interest of completing whatever, of ensuring that you can do whatever role you want to do with your given ship.
yes, 100%. You do not need to use the largest possible thing on any particular mount just because it can fit on that mount. As an example, my beam, oh, this is the wrong one. My beam battleship runs a defender on the size 4 mount right here. And I've been doing that for quite a long time now, and it's very, very effective. It increases the total amount of PD that you get on that ship by a large amount. So my Axford is now the center of this battle fleet. Being a frontline, I want to continue in that in good faith. So I'm just going to add some beam DDs here, and I'm going to go pretty quick here, just because beam DDs are very simple. Now, layout for beam DDs, in my opinion, other people might disagree with me here for this, but I just do this. This is a very, very bare bones beam DD that you can do for essentially, oh, I guess they want to do birthing right here. For, what is this? 410 points. This is a very empty ship. But, you know, I'm just using this for extra beams, you know? Like, this is... So beam DDs are... Beam DDs are not typically... when you're not using them typically in like an assault role, but like I was saying before, you can use them like that. And usually they need jamming to be working well in that role. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit more Gucci. It's going to be a little bit more buffed up. So I'm going to have to really work something in here to make this not really bad. If I want to do two FPAs, I have to make some sacrifices here. So either I can do a whip and suffer with not being able to turn the ship, or I can do a dragonfly and actually be able to turn the ship. So that's kind of a decision you're going to have to make, is how much micro do you want to be doing here? And how slowly you're going to be doing things. You know, like you can be pushing with the Axford and following up behind with the beam DDs, because the Axford can take a lot more punishment than the DDs can. And the DDs can be angled behind the Axford as you're pushing up on different rocks and like moving between different spots. And they can cover your approach. They can also cover behind you. They can protect different things. You can use beam DDs in a lot of different ways. They don't have to be with the Axford all the time. But we kind of want to be building a fleet that, you know, is working with the Axford. So I'm going to add a sprinter in here as well. I'm going to keep this really bare bones DD with a dragonfly just to support the Axford behind me. I can also use this for something else if I wanted to as well. Like I could leave it behind at a different point to protect the point. But that's not really following the whole front line. So this is mixing roles. This is what I'm doing. I'm changing the roles of this fleet. Like I said before, I could just duplicate the Axford and make a full frontline fleet. So it's 2 beam Axfords and be really aggressive with it, right? But now I'm changing the role of this fleet. So now this fleet has both a frontline ship, which I'm going to be using to probe and push into the opponent's territory or space that they control. And I'm also bringing a beam DD that's a little slower. That'll kind of follow up behind and protect me or defend a point or some such. I would like to make this a little better, but for this particular case, I actually think I'm just going to leave it like this. So from here, in the spirit of trying to make something that's a little bit more aggressive, let's do... Actually, you know what? Let's do some torpedo corvettes in addition to our beam Axford. We'll try to make these as cheap as humanly possible so that we can fire a bunch of torpedoes at somebody and then follow up with the beam Axford and then hopefully that will be able to kill them. When you're designing a corvette, one of the things I really like to do is just do full RDC on the front. You can get away with some pretty crazy overcrew on corvettes, actually. Like you can do box steering here, and then you do a reinforced magazine, and there's 4 components that are reinforced here, and you're fine with crew complement. Also notice right here that the aux steering is I could even move my RDC. Yeah, so my reinforced locker is the last compartment on the list. So my CIC is going to suck up 20 crew. Auxiliary steering is going to suck up 10, I think. 5. So yeah, 25 command, 15. So I can go over crew by 40 here. And I'm 50, so I'm 10 over crew. I can take this to 80 out of 40 before I start noticing it on DC teams. And that's just totally insane. You know? And this is a very strong setup for this because they're all reinforced components. The damage that this can take is quite a lot before it actually dies. Unless it, you know, one thing with sprinters is they don't have any damage reduction, so you will take a lot of damage still here. And for my drive, I think I'm going to just do an R drive just to complete the reinforced theme that we're going with here. And since these are throwaway, I'm just going to ignore DC for them, or what are they called? Where did these come from? I'm just going to ignore PD for the moment. A huge list of barcode missiles. When you're designing a missile, this is a whole other thing that we'll have to be going over at some point. So I'm just going to choose a different one of these missiles that I have rather than go through an explanation. I'm going to use a active command validated missile. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I'm just going to go with old reliable, which is active ARAD. It's just in case I get jammed or something like that. You know, what if I come against a cello and notice too, using free approach on torpedoes is very bad. Use minimum angle. Yeah, so I'm using my fixed anti-radiation as my primary and fixed active radar as my secondary. This is an 11-point torpedo with 5 kilometers of range, which is the same range as my beam, so this keeps within the theme of what we're doing here. And how much does this cost me? 306 points. Well, this is a pretty good cheap throwaway ship, so I'm just going to duplicate this 5 times. Now I've got 5 torpedo corvettes in addition to my beam Axford, and I can just fill the remaining 4 points out with flak. And there you go. Let's see how good this is. Probably not a great fleet, but hopefully you learned something here. I don't typically do a lot of formations if I can avoid it, but usually you can't avoid it. There you go. There's my tutorial example of a frontline combat fleet. Now, one thing too, you'll notice as well, I chose not to put PD on this, and that may or may not come to bite me. But these fleets should be, these 2 groups of ships should be working together. They should not be separated. They should be working together. What you want to be doing is you want to be peaking with the Axford maybe someone sees the Axford, right? You're like looking around a rock and you like peek and you look and then you hop back and they're like, oh, there's an Axford there, like by itself. Like I'll go try and kill that. And then you just have the your torpedo corvettes right there, and then you just fire with everything at the same time. Try to kill it with your beam BB or beam CH as well. It would be nice to try to get a missile bus on here to get 2 missiles out at once, but torpedoes do fire once every 3 seconds now, so it is very fast. You probably don't need the extra bus. You can always, you can always just test against a fleet to see. So
why no torp turret?
So I really like the torp turret, but one of the problems with the torp turret is that it doesn't have any elevation. So when you're running a formation like this, I can do a torp turret design after this. Actually, I'll show one of the. I like them on CLs. They're fun on CLs, but with a swarm like this of corvettes, if you're running torp turrets, you're going to have issues where some of the corvettes are not angled correctly. So you'll have one corvette fire a torpedo, and then the other one will fire a torpedo, and then 2 of them will fire a torpedo, and then the first one fires another torpedo, and then the 5th one fires its first torpedo. It's very staggered. But with missile strikes, you want all of them to be firing at the same time, right? You don't want to be messing around with any kind of waiting period. You want all those missiles to be shooting at the same time, and you can get that with CLS and VLS. You can't get that with TLS all the time. TLS is too unreliable in that regard unless it's all on the same platform, which is why I really like the TLS CL. TLS CL is pretty fun if you run it with Dragonflies, because then you can rotate the whole ship and actually get the missiles off all at once. So, yeah, I'm gonna start the new fleet then. How much time do I? God, that was an hour. It's a long time. So this is an example of a frontline fleet. If anyone wants this fleet to look at, I can post it, unless you made it yourself as well. So this next fleet, I'm gonna do something that's a little more, kind of like a. First of all, do the TLS CL. Just for funsies. Do something a little more unconventional. This will be like a support fleet. And support fleets are, what I mean by that is, like, when people say support, they don't mean like you want to be building something that is like, oh, you're just doing like radar or whatever. You need to be able to kill stuff with a support fleet. It's not just like, oh, I'm just here to like, counter jam for you or like shoot, I don't know, something with minimal effect. You really need to be able to actually like do something for your teammates. Support fleets can be a little less front heavy than frontline fleets can be, or backline. And typically, support fleets are actually there to do a lot of capping or defending points, which was, I believe, a part of what I was saying before with the this document here that Vren recently posted with how to do a fleet building. So that's a part of the whole defending points and holding space. So let's get rid of that for now. I gotta monitoring your total points is really important as well when you're doing stuff like this. I don't know how this is already 911 points, but whatever. Thought I could. I think I have one that's like. No, I don't. I'm just gonna load a fleet real quick. Bear with me here. Here we go. How did I do that? Oh, it's all rapids. Okay, I'll just demonstrate this fleet, I guess. So this is a skirmishing fleet that I built during testing, and it's using radar active torps instead. Oh, I'm using cringe. So it uses 2 gun CLs, which are done in a pretty normal configuration here with defenders. They're using rapids. So I'm really skimping on DC in order to get these 3 CLs in together, but they do have a lot of damage output, and they're really good at, as long as I'm smart about how I'm moving around the map, like this can do a lot of damage, right? Like I have torpedoes here for dealing with larger ships like LNs. LNs are quite susceptible to torpedoes if you can get them on. Also Ocellos, you can even use these against shuttles if you really wanted to. Like who really cares? You do have the gun CLs for this too, but this is an example of a skirmishing fleet using TLS CL. Are there any questions about this? Since I'm not actually just straight up building this right away, so you don't see my design process, but
Why the dragonfly on the torpedo vessel?
I will gladly demonstrate that. The reason why the dragonfly is there is because TLS has no elevation and no depression. So it needs to be horizontal to the direction of fire before it will actually shoot.
We're reading you.
Let's say, just for imagination's sake,
Acknowledged. Course laid in.
I'm moseying along in my torpedo CL, and suddenly I see this here, Ocello. You go away.
Orders.
And I'm like, oh no, I need to... Oops. I need to shoot you as fast as possible, otherwise I'm gonna die.
Solution locked in.
You want to hold fire there real quick just to make sure that your missiles don't shoot one at a time. But see how quickly the ship rotates? Right? If I don't have a dragonfly, it's not going to do that. You'll notice that these are trying to... TLS are quite unreliable. So you need to get something... You need to give them as many advantages as you possibly can. So that works quite well. If it was both of these CCs, I've done this test a few times with this fleet, the torpedoes won't get through because they don't have weave. If there's more than 3 defenders or 3 Pavis, I think, 6 torpedoes without weave are not going to get through it. But I don't believe. I could be wrong though. Last I tested it, that's the way it was, at least on the configuration that I'm using right here. This is a pretty interesting little fleet. I really like this one. I will post this one just in case everyone wants to have a look at it.
Could you place all of these fleets into a Google Drive, which I will attach to the
yes,
recording?
I could. Yeah, I could do that. Sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
So do you want me to do a demo for doing a skirmishing or a like a cap support fleet for ANS real quick, or do you want me to just jump over to OSP? I guess.
I mean, caps are like
Holy
the
crap.
most important thing in the game. I think it's a very good idea
Cap?
to do that.
Okay, we'll do a quick support cap fleet. Okay, so instead of trying to do a CL, I mean, TLS CLs are pretty fun, so that was good. But let's do something here. This is an actual support fleet now. Frigates, most powerful ship in the game. This best ship in the game, I think. It's really good. we'll just do some. You know, with a support fleet, you can get away with some pretty weird, unique builds. You know, with frigates, normally frigates, their power comes from stacking a ton of them, like a whole bunch of frigates, and then you just do the same thing. They're homogenous. Oh, this is something I wanted to talk about before, actually. There's a difference between homogenous and non-homogenous fleets. If you're building a homogenous fleet, it, like as it says, it just means they're all the same. And homogenous fleets are typically frontline fleets. You want to have the same thing as much as possible because you want to front end all of your damage. You want to kill stuff really fast. That's the point of frontline fleets. With support fleets, you don't really need to do that. You can build them in such a way that they do a lot of different things not very well. They're kind of like jacks of all trades. So I'm just going to put some... Oh man, I have way too many missile templates. I'll just use this one. Wait a minute, is this a cruise missile? No. Okay. I don't know why all my missiles are free approach. I think that's from when I was doing instant stage where you actually do want to use free approach. So this ship is going to be given a Pinard electronic support module because Pinards are really, really good. I don't see a lot of ANS bring these. You really should be using these if you're running a support fleet, especially. Like, they are very good. It helps you just, you know, it's like having an EWR, except people can't tell when you're spotting them. It's very, very strong. It also, in the case of having a bullseye here, you can turn your radar off and lock onto the Pinard track. So we're gonna make a like a detection frigate here. We're gonna give it a spyglass and then an adaptive. Let's see, power. So we're overpowered, so we'll just put a micro on. We don't really need to be very specific with this. And then the blanket is just there. You know, I don't like taking a single blanket. And especially without a an actively cooled amplifier, like it does kind of feel bad when you have to wait for 60 seconds for cooldown time compared to what it's like with an ACA where it's like 40 seconds. It's just so much better with an ACA. But this ship isn't really meant to be jamming anything. The only reason the jammer's there is if I do get spotted, it's probably going to be at their maximum detection range. And because of that, I can just turn the ship around, jam them, and I'm invisible, and then get out of their detection range. At maximum range, jammers are pretty good at keeping you invisible because the radar isn't, you know, like, especially if you angle the ship right, frigates are really good at being, like, if you're at a 45-degree angle like that with a frigate, and you get spotted and then you jam them, you're going to be invisible again, pretty typically. Also, because this ship is going to be far away from battle, I don't need to bring a reinforced CIC if I don't want to. It will save me 15 points not bringing it, so I'm going to take the gamble and just do a basic. Always take your reinforced magazine because it's free. Same with the berthing. They just add hit points for free if you can. Some situations like before with those corvettes I showed, I chose not to put a berthing on them, but that's because the setup that I was using for the front half of the ship, like, it was 3 reinforced components and an auxiliary steering. That's a lot of hit points. It's a lot of protection. I don't want the berthing because the berthing has 50 hit points. But in this case, it's a free module, and it gives me free hit points. So I'm just going to take it. I also don't expect this ship to... First of all, I don't want it to get shot at. I don't expect it to get shot at. It probably will get shot at. If it does get shot at, well, it's going to die. So I'm just going to accept that fact and run 2 rapids for the flank speed. You do want rapids on something like this in order to deal with flank speed. Making the assumption, and this is another really big thing too, is you make the assumption about a lot of different things. You always have to make assumptions in this game because you do not have perfect information. Nebulous is by its design a game where you don't have all information. So I'm making the assumption the ship isn't getting shot at. So here's my little Pinard BLS blanket bullseye frigate. And this ship is going to be very useful for spotting things. If I spot a tug or something like that up in space, I could possibly harass it with VLS, or I can shoot shuttles with this as well. Being only 2 missile channels, you are taking a bit of a gamble here because there's a chance that they don't have any. Let's see if I can reduce this in price. Can I? Oh, okay, I guess not. For some reason I thought that was cheaper. Oh, it's semi-active. That's the cheap one. Okay. Being 2 missile programming channels, even a single Pavis is going to stop these missiles. Like this is really only here just to give this ship a little bit of something to fight back against things at range. I would almost consider just running a VLS-3, maybe, and then running hybrids instead, like some cheap hybrids. The old classic here. Let's see here. We'll do stacks. If you don't know what these are, this Swiss Army knife. This is someone else's design, but they're really, really good missiles. So I'm going to run 6 of those instead. These are the D variant that I changed, so they're non-cruise guided, but I don't really care about having cruise for these, so it actually reduces the price of the ship a little bit as well here. So that's nice. And then we'll carry on to the next part of what I want. Maybe we'll do 2 of these ships. Just because we're trying to support our teammates here, right? We want to be killing shuttles, tugs, things like that with these 2 ships if we do see them targets of opportunity. Otherwise, they are just spotters, largely. You want to be getting like vision for your teammates or locking things for your teammates. That's very, very important if you can. Next, because this is a support fleet, your role is to be capping points. And this is going to be a lot of micro, unfortunately, but that is just the way it goes. You don't have to be spending your entire time controlling all these different ships. You can leave them in different spots. But you are going to need to use corvettes in order to do some capping. So I'm going to do the same build that I did before because I really like it. And it's actually a little bit, probably needs to be changed because it's a bit crazy what you can get away with here. Since it's 40 over, I can actually run double guns. It's still at 66. I think I can do 2 defenders. 72 out of 40 for over crew. And it's totally fine. You'll have all your DC. So R drive, how much is this? 300 points? Yeah. So this is a full reinforced auxiliary. This can take a lot of damage, and it's got 2 guns. It will probably die to rocket shuttles. Unfortunately, the reality is that if a rocket shuttle can catch you in a specific angle where it's able to fire both of its rockets at the same time, where only one of your defenders is pointing at it, the corvette's going to die, probably. So you have to just sort of treat these things as pretty expendable, which is okay, because they're only 300 points. And with 2 Mark 62s, that is 300 rounds per minute. So I'm going to do... I'm going to do 200 rounds of AP, 300 of HE, and 200 of HERPF. So that's approximately 25 minutes of combat time. Most games don't really last that long, and you're sure as fuck not going to be shooting that long with the Corvette. And if you are, you're probably in not a good situation. I'm only going to do 4,000 rounds of 20 mil because I'm a cheap bastard. Oh, you know what? Just to even it out, I'll make it 6,000. Yeah, and then we're going to duplicate this let's duplicate it 5 times. I got just under 500 points. And another really fun thing that you can do with support fleets like this that I always see some of the other people that do is you do a beam DD, like a little cheap beam DD like I did before. These are really great because they can defend points very well. They are very, very good at killing things that try to take points back from you. I think I was able to fit a whip, well, not a whiplash, a dragonfly here. Yeah, this is actually very cheap. It's basically just a beam, like literally just a beam. No command. Oh, right. I do need that, don't I? Don't go into games without a CIC. You will make a fool of yourself. So there we go, 2946. This is a very cheap 420 point beam DD that you can just use to hold a point. It's similar, I guess, in the sense to mines that you just leave it near a point somewhere. And when someone tries to go cap it, you pop it out and beam them. Actually, I'm also going to put a bullseye on this thing as well, just to bring these points up a little more and give it a locking mechanism. And then I got how much points left? Guess I'll just put a shaft box on here. And there you go. There's your little cat fleet. You got 5 expendable corvettes that are very tanky, actually. And then 2 support frigates with spyglasses, ARR. So you can see a lot of the map with this. These are very, very good at spotting a lot of the map. And then your beam DD for defense. And you just want to, you know, the way you want to be playing this fleet is, first of all, in any game you play on pillars, you're going to sacrifice one of these corvettes to take A right at the start of the game. That's just for your team's sake. Like, you're doing that for your team. You just throw one of these bastards in and you take it, or die trying. Or you can be smart about it and let the opposing team, whether that's ANS or OSP, try to take it first, and then hopefully your team kills the ship that tries to cap, and then you can send in your corvette so that it doesn't die to rockets. It's also an option. And then, yeah, you just want to be moving around with these frigates to try to spot your opponent's spotting ships, like EWR, R400, shuttles that are trying to go around the map, right? Like, you want to be pretty active with your positioning of these 2 frigates. So, let's see. Name the other one tutorial fleet, right? Oh, it's in starter fleet. It's weird. No, it's not. Okay, so that's ANS. We'll go over to OSP. Now, OSP is a lot more restrictive than ANS, and I actually prefer OSP right now, but it is definitely the weaker faction. So you do have to be a bit more creative with how you go about doing this. But OSP, by its design, actually kind of lets you do that in some ways. You're just limited in your options. For OSP, I'll start with a Frontline fleet, just because it's really, really easy. Now, liners are brutal. Liners, I can't. Unfortunately, because of the way that OSP was designed as well, liner choice is a little bit weird here. Like, I don't really want this particular hull layout for what I want to do here. I want to bring this mount 15 to the side of the ship right here. There are situations where having the mount 15 right here is actually better than having it on the side. Like, if I was building a plasma liner, this is a really good setup for a plasma liner. Personally, I don't like the short box LNs. I prefer the long ones because you get a bit more volume tank out of them. Here we go. This is exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to do a 250 liner because this is literally the most basic design you can do for OSP. And it's very, very strong frontline. So, like I said before, fill out all your guns. I am a very firm believer in PD is for suckers. So, I'm just going to stack even more guns on this thing. Though I do need a pinpoint, actually. For OSP Frontline, you always want a locking mechanism. You need it. You just 100% need it because ANS is jamming. ANS will jam you to high heaven and back any opportunity they get. That is just one of their strengths, and a pinpoint at least within 6.5 kilometers, if you can get a track, will hold that track quite well through, I believe, up to 2 blankets. If it's more than 2 blankets, then it starts getting, you know, you're gambling basically. But in this case, we'll just make, again, the assumption that we're not going to be have to deal with that. And if we do have to deal with more than 2 blankets, we're going to have to be smart about our play. And that's another part about this game as well. You have to make decisions about when you're actually going to be taking a fight and when you're not going to be taking a fight. Just because you're playing with a good ship that is very front heavy, that you know can kill something very quickly. If you get a lock and you're like, oh yeah, like I want to just get that, I want to kill that ship that I know is there. Like, you got to be smart about the engagements you're taking. It doesn't matter how good your ship is. If you're getting shot for free, you're going to die. So layout for internals for LNs. So one thing about LNs is these 3 front compartments. These 3 front compartments are beautiful. I usually put the reinforced magazine right here. I put the reinforced CIC right here. And then I put an RDC right here. And like I said before, 3 reinforced components right next to each other, right? That reduces the probability that they're going to die if a shell hits them and explodes. Right? With LNs too, it's 20% reduction. So even on 150 damage, RDC 40 damage threshold, yeah, they're still not going to die. Well, maybe the RDC will, because it's 35. I don't know what the damage is. 150. What is that? Anyone got quick maths? $120. So yeah, the RDC might die, but at least it'll get grade. But you're splitting the damage up between these 3 components either way, so it's just good practice to do that. Anytime you can stack 3 reinforced components together, always take it. We can get rid of this basic now. And then crew is kind of less of a problem with LNs, just because you can, you know, you can just use one of these large compartments. Could do DC storage, could do double DC storage if you really wanted to, and then depends how expensive you want to make this thing. I'll just make this 1,000 point LN because that's my standard build for this. And I usually do an aux as well. Aux steering's very important on LNs, I think, because at some point your CIC is probably going to get knocked out. And just in general, honestly, like aux steerings are just such a good component. I can't say this enough. I really made a mistake when I first started playing by not thinking that they were particularly good, but they are very, 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 very good. This is a little crazy. You get a lot of restores in this thing. So we got 6 DC teams. We got 11 restores on this ship. That's pretty good. Obviously no PD, but change it up possibly if we want to do that and have PD, because I know torpedoes. I've really noticed lately actually that getting away with no PD is a lot harder than it used to be, because people are bringing things like backpack torpedo launchers, and against a ship with no point defense, if you get hit by torpedoes like that just rushing you, you know, you might be able to win the gunfight, but when the guns start bringing missiles, you start losing very quickly. So we're just going to run ammunition elevators. The best setup for a gun platform LN is triple AE double RCC. This is just the way it is because of the way the numbers line up. You get around 80 rounds per minute, which is a very high rate of fire, and a lot of things will die very fast to that. Typically, when I bring a... We'll make this a plasma liner fleet as well. We'll add a plasma liner in here, so we'll get HEHC as well. If you don't bring a plasma liner, you just do HE. Don't bring HEHC. It doesn't pen anything without plasma. 250 AP, the best shell in the game. Oh, I forgot Grape. Grape is really, really good. This is one of the reasons why I do PD-less liners, is because this liner with the 100 mils using Grape, it's good against everything in the game. It just, there's not a single target you can't engage with this and do damage. So liners are just really, really strong. So yeah, so we can look at our damage output. Again, download the Hidden Stats mod. Highly recommend, really good. It gives you 800 Grape rounds. I often find that I go through more than that in a game usually. And then AP, bring very little AP. 300, 100 mil AP is probably enough. For 250 AP, however, we're going to want 1100. And that's because you are going to be shooting a lot with this ship. At least you should be shooting a lot. You are easily going to be shooting for over 10 minutes with this thing throughout a whole game. So you could even go as far as 1200. And then I usually bring 900 rounds for HE, just over the 10-minute mark. You use less HE than you will AP typically for a 250 liner. The only time you're going to be using HE is when you're shooting below CLs, I find, typically. You can use AP against other stuff. You can see a Balon Destroyer, for instance. Shoot it with AP. It's just going to die. Anything broadside HE is good too, but AP is just so strong. So that's only 929 points. Put a yard drive on here. One thing with LNs, I do not like playing them without yard drives. There are a lot of other configurations actually. I've seen ships that use the, let's see here. Like they'll do like a sun drive with a yard drive, or a base yard drive with a long haul. And it does work in certain situations. I personally don't like it. I don't really mind that my LNs don't move as fast as some of those builds do. I think that you can just run LNs on flank pretty much permanently. This is another thing about the way that I play this game. I whenever I'm moving, I'm flanking, because positioning is so important in this game that you need to be able to get around the map as quickly as possible, get out of fire as quickly as possible. You know, repositioning yourself is just so important. And LNs have absolutely ridiculous linear thrust with the large yard drive at 52 meganewtons. Like it even says here, acceleration time is 5.76 seconds. That's faster than a sprinter. They get to max speed faster than a sprinter does. And it's just completely bonkers how quickly you can reposition these ships. So I just run them on flank most of the time. Yeah, so this is a pretty standard 250 build for an LN. From here, we can just duplicate it. And again, I am just going to scum this because I don't want that top mount to be like this. I want it to be facing the side. Facing the side, yeah. Okay, this is, again, too, this is the layouts of LNs as well, right? You'll notice that they're quite different. Having the layouts like this is a little worse than having the layouts like this. And the reason for that is because if a shell hits right here, you're going to get spray into this spot too. It makes them a lot more susceptible to missiles as well. So I do want the long LN. It's frustrating having to cycle through all of these, but it's just the way it is. If you want to build an LN in a specific way, then you have to do it. Okay, well, we'll just do that for now. Oh, come on. There we go. That's a good one. That works. So now we have 2 LNs, and let's duplicate this again. And we got lucky. Hooray. Oh, we got really lucky, actually, because this is going to be our plasma liner now. So what we want to do is we want to just empty this stuff out. Really, someone suggested right-click to remove. I think that should be implemented. Oh, actually, I can probably leave the DC setup. Oh, that's right. Okay. So then, yeah, we're gonna do a plasma cannon. So you'll see some people like doing the obelisk style of plasma LNs, where they have them standing upright, and they'll use the plasma cannon, like the turreted plasma cannon, rather than the casemate. I personally prefer the casemate, and the reason for that is because the casemate has 500 hit points and 40 damage threshold, and the turret has 15 damage. The big thing is the damage threshold, to be honest. Like, 15 damage threshold is just nothing. Like that, you know, that's really, really detrimental to a ship that's trying to be a frontline brawler. Like, you really just don't want that. You need to have as much hit points as you possibly can, as much damage threshold as you possibly can across all components. Just for some variation here, we'll do some PD on this ship, just because I always go without PD, so. E20s aren't right here. And that's pretty good. I'm okay with that. Oh, right here as well. I still get 3 T20s out of that, so that's pretty good. We can get rid of the 250 ammunition. Oh, what happened here? Oh, right, I removed the drive in the reactor. And we haven't buffed them yet, so we'll buff them first. I already know off by heart I probably need about 500 rounds of plasma ampules, but we'll just do this for so you can see. So again, gonna do a yard drive because I want that rotation rate more than anything. Like the acceleration buff to linear thrust, like the large yard drive is just the best drive in the game. But it's primarily this rotation stuff that I'm looking for here, because I already have really high linear thrust. I don't really need this buff to it. Like, even if you just remove it, you can see the LN. Oh, not remove. Yeah, LN already has a really high acceleration time. We're only gaining 2 seconds in acceleration time. But it does make a difference. I think we have to do a boosted reactor in this setup. I can't remember. We'll see when I get the modules done. Do a light civilian reactor. And then we'll do energy regulators. We need lots of energy regulators. Well, 3 energy regulators specifically. Oh, this is another thing too, actually. So, 200. So, you want the reactors next to the DC. And the reason for this is because the DC teams, if you get shot, and the first spot that gets hit is like right here, right? Say it's right here. First of all, the civilian reactor has a lot more hit points. It's 200 hit points. So you're just adding to total hit point pool within a specific section of the ship, which is really good. You want to kind of just keep the beefy components all together. You want to kind of conglomerate as much of your hit points as possible into as small an area as possible. But it also means that if for whatever reason, if the light civilian reactor gets killed right away, at least the DC is just there and they can repair it quickly. They don't have to muck around moving throughout the ship. Losing energy regulators, while it does suck, it doesn't suck as much as losing your reactors. So you want to keep them next to the DC. Also, you don't want them next to each other. You want to space them out. So like that. We got one underneath these DCs, then one next to that DC. We'll do an E-Reg. Can we get away with a fourth E-Reg? We can. Wow, okay. I think this is faster than my normal ones. I don't know how I did this, but whatever. 4 E-Regs. Oh, it's because I did a boosted. Booster reactors are also crazy good. Like, it's like, oh no, catastrophic event, 10%, like compared to, what is this, 5%? It's just, yeah, it's definitely the booster reactor, isn't it? Yeah. That 5% difference is just like, who cares? Doesn't matter. Get reactor crit, just scram it. You have 11 restores. And then we can do this. I love doing this on my plasma liners now, just to give them more damage. And 53, so it's only 36, so we can get away with. Oh, this needs to be 6 because my rounds per minute are a lot higher. 10 minutes of plasma is more than you're ever gonna need, but it's just fun to keep shooting it most of the game, anyways. So. And we can get away with 500 rounds probably of 250. You're not going to be shooting very much with this either, just because you don't have any buffed modules. Buffing modules to it at least. Oh, this has got emptied somehow. And yeah, so now we have, what is this? 16 points to spare. I mean, that's really have any. Oh, right. I need 20 mil. 10,000 rounds of 20 mil. And then, yeah, you just have 10 points left here. So, you know, just dump that into something else. Like, let's just put a VLS in here. If you don't know what you want to, if you have points left over like this and you don't know what to spend them on, just put a chaff box on something. It's always worth it just to even out. Like chaff, a lot of people use active. And there you go. There's your Frontline OSP fleet. And now I'm going to do a OSP OSP support fleet. But I'm actually going to use one of these 250 LNs for this. I recently built a fleet that's kind of like this, and I'm just going to replicate it again because I think it's quite interesting, actually. Though I am going to reduce the amount of points here, I do need to bring this down to about 800 points, or maybe 850 or something like that. So I'm going to get rid of a large DC storage. You really don't need 2 large DC storages. So we'll put a aux steering here instead. Yeah, this is a pretty tanky section of the ship now with that too, right? Yeah, so 900 points. I'm going to try to bring this down a little bit more. So yeah, I know it's exactly 900. And now OSP, it's a lot cheaper, so you can get away with doing this. I can add a tug, and I can say, well, I want to do like a kind of like I did before with that frigate for ANS. I want something that's able to kind of spot stuff, still kind of be engaged in the fight here. So huntresses are actually pretty good. I never used them before, but until recently, but they're actually quite good. They're kind of like a budget spyglass if you run them with an AR. And then you can do a similar setup to before, like I did. I already do reinforced component. RCIC. I try to want to avoid that, right? Like I want my CIC to not be. Oh wait, actually, no. This is good, right? Because this sucks crew up from the bottom up. So yeah, this lets me go over crew, like I said before. Then we'll do an aux steering. We'll do an aux steering here. Now, this is one thing about tugs that kind of sucks is that their small compartments aren't large enough for an RDC. So you kind of got to make the choice. Well, okay, do I want to do like an RDC? Or do I want to just suffer with a small? I'm just going to suffer with a small, even though I don't really want to. So I know it shows the command above the damage control here, but it definitely... Oh, I want to swap these. That's frustrating. It means this dies first, but whatever. Guess you gotta make sacrifices. Unless I don't need to do that. Maybe I don't need to do that. Small DC locker, 20. No, I don't need to do that. So my RCIC is taking up 20 plus engineering, so that's 80, so 70 out of 40. Doesn't matter, I still have 10 crew I can go over if I really want to. And then I can leave this empty. Well, I'm not gonna, because berthings are hit points, so I'm just gonna add a berthing there. It's not really necessary. Then I'm going to add I want this to be a multi-role ship. This is like a similar kind of idea to what I was doing with that ANS fleet, where this isn't a frontline fleet. This is a fleet that's going to be cruising around on the edges and kind of, giving tracks, supporting, just spotting stuff, like killing sprinters if it sees them. That's why I'm adding MLS here. So my MLS is going to be able to fire 4 S2s at once. Cruise. I don't know why I have that. That's bad. We'll just do that for now. See how many I can get. 10. Yeah, RDCs don't let you take too much more than that, but 10 is okay. It's got weave on it, I think. Do I have weave? I'll do weave. This will let you get through the PD with 4 missiles. That's the difference. None weave, well, it'll probably all die to 1 defender, but if you do weave and you fire 4 of these things at a single ship with a defender, I'm almost certain that 2 of them are probably going to get through. And we'll add some HE and AP. Only need 100 rounds. Base C53 unbuffed is like 10 rounds per minute. So that's literally 100 rounds is 10 minutes of fire. It's just basically nothing. It just gives you a little bit of damage if you want to try and kill something. And then we'll add a Bellbird for a bit of jamming. And then a pinpoint for locks and a chaff box. 13 chaff. This is a pretty cheap little support tug. I'll just duplicate that. Then we'll start doing the actual capping stuff for OSP. Now, shuttles are kind of strange because gun shuttles are actually good, but rocket shuttles are typically better, is the fundamental line of thought here. You can get I think you can get a rocket shuttle for only 100 points more than a gun shuttle. So kind of depends on whether or not you're trying to save points for something else. You do double like this, and then do reinforced. Don't need a berthing, actually. Ignore that. Can even do double lock steering if you really wanted to, but having a rapid for the flank speed is, again, very important. Yeah, so this is, shuttles are pretty straightforward with how you're going to design them. They don't really have a lot of components. They don't have a lot of spots that you can really do much with. So there's very, very specific designs that you can do. I'll show you a few different things you can do with them. Another really interesting one is the Adaptive Radar Huntress shuttle. This is not great for track quality, but it lets you see things from pretty far away. And these things are, like, shuttles have really good stealth characteristics. So you can use these to spot things from pretty far away. I'm not going to add these because I already have Huntresses on my tugs. And these have pinpoints to get good track quality if I need to do that, but it does require them to get closer. And duplicate this again. Duplicate it again. And duplicate it again. So I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 sets of 2 shuttles, and I'm going to add a jammer to one of them. So this will allow the shuttles to get pretty close without being seen and or locked on if you jam.
Imperial, we're getting a lot of hot miking off of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, yeah, here we go. We have 2 sets of rocket jamming shuttles. These are going to be your capping groups. I mean, you can sacrifice the tugs if you really wanted to for more shuttles. I'm sure a lot of people would say that's actually better than doing what I'm doing right now, but we're for interest of variation here because, it's kind of boring just playing the same thing over and over again. It's fun to play different builds that are kind of a little bit more unique and actually not terrible. Like, these aren't bad. There's definitely better setups that you can do for this, but these are kind of fun and they're not going to be bad. This LN, the reason I kept this LN is because this LN is going to act very similarly to how that Beam DD was acting in the previous build. You're going to want to keep these. You can do one of 2 things with these actually compared to the Beam DD. It's a little bit more versatile. You can support your teammates using this LN while you do whatever with the other ships. Or you can keep it behind and protect points, right? Like this is actually really useful for as your team moves around the map, you can rotate around behind them with this LN and protect the points as you move away. Because a big part of this game as well is knowing when to, you want to be taking points faster than you're losing them, losing ships slower than you're killing them, and making your opponent progress slower than you are, basically. It's delaying. It's about accelerating your own team's progression and delaying your opponent's team's progression. And that's what that LN is there for. Since we have a little bit of points left, we can just make a really cheap early warning radar tug, which is always worth it. If you have the points to do it, you should do it. Let's get rid of that. I think we can probably buff these up a little bit too. We really wanted to. Oh, I did R drives, didn't I? Oh, that's good. Well, I'll make the tugs have R drives as well, man. Because why not? Oh. Beds. And I had chat boxes, didn't I? It did. So maybe we'll put a chat box on this one as well, just because. Not going to get a lot of chaff out of it. Only 2, but whatever. You win some, you lose some. This tug is definitely losing. Low power. Uh-oh. Nice. Doesn't matter. There you go. There's your support OSP fleet. Couple of things on this. It is a little weak on capping power, but you are making up for that with a little bit of what would typically be seen as frontline. So it's not bad. You do kind of sacrifice like an A cap here, like an early game, getting if you're like a map like Pillars where there's a single point in the middle, there's one neutral. You know, like Pillars is one of those maps that has two naturals and one pillar per team. If you don't know what that means, that just means like when you start the game, there's 2 points that are closer to your team that you can take right away versus more than that. So typically there's some maps, most maps with 5 points, it's either 3 points that are neutrals and 2 points that are naturals, or 2 points that like are naturals per side plus 1 neutral. If there's 1 neutral, it's really, really important that the team that takes it first is the team that decides the momentum of the game because they can play defensively. The team that doesn't take it at the start of the game has to play aggressively, like they're forced into that. And this gets back to what I was saying before about how when you're playing the game, you're trying to make your opponents lose faster than you lose, right? So it's like you by taking that point at the start of the game, you're doing that. You're taking the initiative basically. So you could also just get rid of this EWR if you wanted to and add a really, really basic shuttle that just, you know, like literally only aux steering. And RCIC, R drive. And you just, like this, how much is this thing? 135 points. Yeah, you just throw this thing. You know, you could even theoretically shave enough points off of this LN actually to take that. 750 point LNs are, you know, you don't really need this thing to be really tanky if you're using it as a defense role. So maybe we'll try to do that actually. We'll just replace all of these with rapids and oxes. I think storages, you can't use the restores if you don't have a regular locker. You can't only use rapids and then use the storage. So we'll replace that with a large. Bring this down to a basic. Bring that down to a rapid. 15 points. Dear God. We might have to make this a small. Yep. So this is a huge reduction in capability of this ship, but it does let us bring an A cap, which will let us sacrifice for the 8 point at the start of the game. So given the fact that this fleet is meant to be a supporting fleet, this is not a bad idea to do. If this was a frontline fleet, I would seriously question doing this with this LN. But it doesn't really matter because you're only using this to delay capping or taking cheeky peek shots at people, you know? Like, you're just trying to use this to defend points and slow your opponent down. They'll think twice before pushing an LN. They don't know that it's 765 points, you know? They don't know that it's basically empty. You never know. That's just part of the equation. You don't know until it dies, really. So yeah, there you go. That kind of concludes this tutorial. Anybody have any questions?
Where's the chapter on hangups?
Oh, I'm sorry, Wallace. Not today. No hangups today.
Dude. Did you go over like the benefit of using the 50-point jammer, the J15 on a rocket shuttle versus like a J360? It's like double the cost of a J15, but there are some instances where having the J360 actually might be useful for the team. I feel like that might be kind of
yeah. So the Lyrebird.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lyrebird. I have used the Lyrebird not too extensively, but I have used it to do some pretty funny stuff. You can really jam things out if you get within the what is the range again? It's 4 kilometers, right? If you get within 4 kilometers of the Lyrebird, you're pretty much invisible until visual range, like 2.5 kilometers. I have done builds with tugs that are just like mine layers, and I've orbited Axfords laying mines using Lyrebirds, and everything is invisible with Lyrebirds. You use like 5 Lyrebirds, and you just pulse them between each of the ships, and you can cloak everything as long as you stay outside of that 3 or 2.5 kilometer range. You just keep everything invisible. It's really, really hard to get through the jamming. There are situations where it's useful, especially on shuttles too. Shuttles with a lyrebird, they're basically invisible close range. It's very hard for gun control like PD, FCR to try to track rockets through lyrebirds as well. Typically, however, it is best to use the bellbird.
Yeah.
It is cheaper and it has longer range, and it's got more uses than the lyrebird does. Lyrebird does jam through rocks though, so you can do some pretty funny things where missiles will be coming at you or something, and you have a lyrebird shuttle that's like just past the rock, and if the missiles that are coming at a ship that's peeking out of the rock, and say they're ARAD or something like that, you turn the lyrebird on, and all the missiles will fly at the lyrebird, but it's behind a rock, so they just fly into the rock. You can do things like that.
That builds off of like when it used to just be ANS versus ANS, you'd throw an interrupt on and go underneath the A rock, and that would clip through the A rock so that command missiles would like get confused. So you can hide ships inside of an interrupt screen that people didn't know was there.
Yeah. So there we go. I hope this was educational, at least for people that were here. Maybe you have some better ideas on how to build your fleets now. Yeah. Yes, it does. All sphere jammers go through rocks, as far as I know. Sorry, I wasn't reading the chat while I was doing all of this.
We've had some other people handling it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Are you,
Yeah.
or is anybody else, planning on doing a missile tutorial at some point?
I don't mind doing a missile tutorial at some point. I'm sure there are other people that would like to do that as well. I will, should I just post these fleets into the shipyard then, or?
Yeah, I think you should post the fleets into the shipyard and then also upload them all into a Google Drive, and I can download them and host them out of my own Google Drive, I guess, and add them to the channel.
Okay, sounds good.
Or the recording, specifically tie them to the recording for anyone who wasn't able to be here.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh yeah, also when you're doing that, please ping Dashort. He's been keeping a list of new player friendly ships, and having something that has already been tutorialized would be very useful.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Please ping Dashort when you post
Oh,
these
right.
ships in to Shipyard, because he's keeping a list of new player friendly vessels, of new player friendly fleets, and I think having a fleet which has already been having multiple fleets that have already been explained in a very long video process would be extremely useful, especially since your fleets cover every single basic role for both factions.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm a little bit dubious about that Axford fleet, to be honest, but we'll see how it goes. Those torpedoes do have weave, so it should be all right, at least if you get ambushes on people. Oh god, I have so many fleets. I need to like go through my folders and like find where I put these tutorial fleets.
So is that the end of the tutorial session? Are there any questions from anyone?
Yeah, if any more questions, anybody has any questions, just unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, this is the end of this. No? Or post in the chat if you don't want to talk. That's okay as well.
How many hangups should I bring?
Wallace, the answer to that is as many as your heart desires.
Oh yeah.
4 scouts is probably not enough for a 12K. I actually was thinking about this a little while ago too. I've seen a lot more people playing 12K lately, and I would be very happy to do a 12K tutorial as well at some point. I love playing 12K. I don't play it very much, but I do like playing it. It's pretty fun. Bridgemaster. The Bridgemaster is, I believe, lower. Is it shorter range than the Frontline? The Frontline gets burn. I know that. The Bridgemaster gives you a fireable track, which the Frontline doesn't really do that. It doesn't give you a high quality track. The Bridgemaster does. Yes, I can do more tutorials at some point as well. I'm totally happy to do that. If people have questions or like they want any specific tutorial, I can do that. Missile designs, rules of thumb for jamming. Rule of thumb for jamming, actually, right now, jamming is most effective between 6 and 8 kilometers because of the way that the radiation works off of the return signal. At maximum range, it's like inverse square law, right? That's what you got to be remembering. Is at max range, there's a lot of decay on both the radar return and the jamming. Both systems work worst at max range. Jamming works best at mid range, and radar works best at close range. So that's why when you get close enough to something, it suddenly appears through jamming, right? There's certain kinds of jamming, like if you have really intense jamming, like 5 or 6 jammers going at once, it is so hard to get a lock through that. You need support modules like floodlights to help you get through jamming at that kind of density, but typically most people bring 4 jammers, which is good enough in most cases to cloak you. There are certain setups that can beat that, but mostly it's good enough. 4 is good enough.
Also, some basic things. Jammers don't stack beyond 6. And like 6 jammers covering any given target. Jammers are directional. And that's covered in like the game's tutorial. And ships can share tracks through jamming, so offsets are very effective at cutting through jammer.
Hangups are probably going to need to get changed a bit for something like that to get changed. But yes, like all comms jamming. If you're not comms jamming something, ships are going to be sharing tracks.
A hang-up buff, you say?
6 jammers at once, Murphy. 6 jammers at once is the most amount of jamming that you want to be running at any amount of time, because you don't get any realistic benefit beyond that. I would even argue that 5 jammers is really the threshold there, because there's very little that anything that can beat 5 jammers probably also beats 6 jammers within like maybe a 200-meter margin of error. Like, I don't really know the exact numbers, but I'm just speaking from experience. You should try for more jammers if you can afford it. I know like sometimes you kind of need to just make sacrifices, and 2 jammers is good enough sometimes. Do you remember though that I believe pinpoints can lock through 2 jammers? I could be wrong about that, but I think they can do that. Yeah, no problem, Robin. I think we'll probably do another one of these at some point. It seems like there's quite a bit of interest in doing this again. If anybody else that is, fairly experienced in this game wants to do this again at some point, that would be good as well. Otherwise, I will do it. All right, guys, I'm going to close the stream now. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for having us, sir.
Yeah, of course.
Indeed, that's very informational. And speaking as someone who's kind of experienced, I learned a lot.
That's good. I'm glad that you also learned a lot. Hopefully, raising the bar of the skill floor. is always really good for this game, I think. I remember when the game started to kind of get that after the first tournament as well. We had like a huge change in the skill floor of this game. Like back this time last year, I would say the vast majority of players were like the average skill was very low.
Yeah, I was here at launch too, so I feel that.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Hunter, like when it comes to countering the war, that relative cost here involved, 4 floodlights, a parallax, an adaptive, and then I guess also add the bullseye into the mix with like the micro reactor needed for it all. You're looking at about maybe like 185 points plus the mounts needed to do that, and that will counter like what 6 J15s, something stupid. Like it's a brute force method, and it's not as finesse as like offsets, which you really should be prioritizing. But
yes,
it's
it is possible to do.
Yeah.
That's the same with doing floodlights too, right? Like you can use floodlights and then burn to counter jamming too, using a bullseye.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Use
Right.
4 floodlights. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I misheard you.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you've been doing a really good job with the lesson. And also there's a benefit of there's the better benefit of floodlights is like if missiles are being launched through jamming, the floodlights will help pick them up a lot sooner.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Bilbo?
I was a little late to this discussion. I was just wondering what might be a quick rundown on what topics you broached.
I'm not gonna repeat all of it. But it was recorded, so there will be a video coming out at some point that you can watch. I will post the fleets that I designed, and then you can go through all that. But yeah, I'll basically I built 2 fleets.
Right. We don't need to hear any of that. So I'm gonna come over here and do my outro. So first off, we don't have anything to look at right now, so I've just put this fantastic picture that Mungo Parker made for me up because I didn't like have anything prepared in advance to have a blank screen. So there you go. You can look at that. Well, I do the podcast section of this. We went over a lot of stuff there. It was very long, and I didn't cut much of it. I know there was a lot of silence in there. Well, a little bit of silence and a lot of uhing and umming. I think it's important for people to see, especially the folks who are watching this. So Hunter is one of probably the top 10, definitely the top 15 players in this game, and he spends like a shitload of time in the fleet editor, and he's still like, I don't know, I could do this, I could do that. Like he's still weighing his options, and we spent 2 hours and made 6 fleets. I mean, I usually spend 2 hours and make like 1 fleet, so very impressive. But this is something I think it's important for newer players to know, is that a lot of this game is going to be spent in the fleet editor, and so if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by it, don't worry. That sensation almost never goes away. You'll get more comfortable with it, but it is really dense. There's a lot of decisions to be made in Nebulous Fleet Command. A lot of decisions. And we discussed some of that during the course of that tutorial, that sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Well, all the time you have to make sacrifices. You can't do everything, and you can't even do one thing as good as you would probably like to. It's a tricky game. It's a tricky game. I hope this was informational to you. So we talked there at the end about people getting better over time. I've got a lot of game time in this. I have over 1,000 hours in Nebulous Fleet Command. And I learned a lot about crew manipulation and a little bit about building support fleets and capper fleets. And that's huge. Both of those things are huge. They're going to affect literally every fleet I have. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so even if you're like a really, really good player on your own, connecting with other people and getting their ideas and sharpening yourselves, sharpening each other, sharpening off of each other is a big part of this game. It's a multiplayer game, but it's also a community game where interacting with people is going to naturally make you better because other people are going to have ideas that you're never going to have. And so I highly recommend, if you aren't already, to come to the Nebulous main Discord. That's a place where people get together and they talk about ships and they talk about builds and they talk about balance and they just talk about random bullshit. That last one happens more than anything else. But they also game together. I also have a Discord where we do similar things, but it's a bit of a different audience. And there's a lot of pinging that happens in there. There's a lot of pinging the literal entire server for games and for stuff. And that link's going to be in the description as well. Yeah, I'm going to put the main Nebulous server link in there. And if you aren't there, highly, highly recommend you go there. Man, good stuff. Real good stuff. Huge, huge thanks to Hunter for doing that. That was a solid 2 hours of running a tutorial. It's actually about an hour past my bedtime, but fuck it. This is important. It's important for people to know. I don't think I have anything else. If you have any questions for me or for Hunter, put them in the comments below. I'll make sure they get back to Hunter. And I can liaise there. Or you can just ping him on the main Discord. I'll speak for him. He's got no problem getting pinged with people asking questions. He and me and some of the rest of the guys are signed up for the Pingable Buddy role, which is designed specifically to assist new players. Oh, there's something. If you're watching this and you're a new player and you're like, holy shit, this is really informational, but I don't know how to actually play the game, like on the ground in a match. Or if you're fairly confident but underperforming for whatever reason, the main Discord also has a role called the Pingable Buddy. These are experienced players, knowledgeable players, who are happy to get a ping from you, from anyone, any time of the day or night, and will, depending on who's online and available, happily help you through a game. They'll join, they'll group up with you, and we'll work with you. We'll teach you the basics of teamwork. They'll show you kind of how to use your fleets, because designing them is only about a quarter of what goes into Nebulous. How to not use your fleets, which is just as important, frankly, and how to synergize with your fellows. That's and all these things are a big deal and integral to winning matches in Nebulous. So ping those people. You can just at Pingable Buddy and the role will show up. Probably just at ping and the role will show up in that main Nebulous Discord. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think that's everything. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I know I did. I'll see you in the battle space. Good night.